Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Logan. I'll be your moderator for Building a Better Scouting System panel. If you have any questions, make sure to ask them in the chat. And without further ado, let's have our panelists introduce themselves with what their favorite robot is.
All right. Good morning,
Klein.
guys. My name's Eric Klein. I'm a mentor for Team 2412 based out of Bellevue, Washington, which is just across the water from Seattle. I'm currently studying over here in Boise, Idaho, but I've previously worked as the scouting lead, business lead, and team captain of Team 2412. My professional experience, as well as with an FRC, is primarily in sales, scouting management, and scouting development. Strategy development. And I'm super excited to be here. As far as favorite robot, I guess it's probably a recency bias, but I got to go with 2019's, 6443's 2019 robot. That little guy running across the field was just so cute to see. And it's a perfect example of managing your team's abilities while still kicking butt out there.
And next we have Ethan Talbert.
I am a senior on 1678, the current leader of the scouting sub-team on 1678. I have my main expertise on in developing our scouting system so far has been the Python server. So if you're unfamiliar, that's mostly our calculations of metrics. I was the main contributor on our predictions for the past couple of years. And I've also been a part of our strategy sub-team for the past couple of years. So I've been in several picklist meetings. The scouting code and my contact information is right there. As for favorite robot for me, that's a pretty hard question. I never got to see it in person, but I really liked 2767's 2019 robot. I just really liked watching that thing move around the field. It was really interesting to watch with all the suction and everything. Yeah.
Finally, we have Saikiran.
Hi, my name is Saikiran Ramanan. I'm a mentor on Team 3476 Code Orange. I've been with the team since 2015, I believe. I'm currently the drive coach and a scouting strategy mentor, and a lot of what I focus on is helping kids develop our scouting systems. I'm an electrical engineer for Northrop Grumman in my regular day job, so this is a lot more fun for me when I get to talk about scouting and strategy. So thank you, Citrus and 2073 and everyone here for having me. And my favorite robot is probably 469 2013. But if we want something more recent, 5026 2018 is one of my favorite intakes of all time. But I guess that's a bit more recent.
And like I mentioned before, I'm Logan Wong. I am part of Team 2073, and I will be your moderator for this panel. So the first question is for Ethan Talbert. What do you do to maximize the user experience?
Okay, it looks like I'm starting this off. This is a very deep question. In order to maximize user experience, I think a lot of what we do in terms of UI and in order to maximize user experience, both on the input end, which is our scouts, and based off of the visualization end, which is the people reading our data, like our match strategist and the people at our picklist meeting, a lot of it is simplicity, at least coming from our philosophies. What that means is that we're trying to limit the amount of data that we're collecting on the scout end and limit the amount of data that is shown to the people who are reading the data, whether it be the match strategist or the picklist people. And what that does is it on the scout end, if they have to track less data, then that means that they're going to track it more effectively, and it's going to be more accurate data. And on the visualization end, if there's less data for them to look at, then they can make more succinct decisions and not be overwhelmed by the sheer amount of data that is given to them. So I think a key thing to take out of what we do to maximize user experience is simplicity. I'd like to hear what the other panelists have to say about this too.
Yeah, oh, sorry. I can definitely give my input on this one. So I think Ethan hit like the nail on the head with a couple of different things, right? I think one is like separating this question in what the scouts like see when they're trying to like collect the data, and like what the people who are trying to process the data see, right? So on the scouting end, I think he also like nailed it when he said that you want to try to like minimize the amount of inputs, right? Because if you have like too many things, it can get overwhelming for scouts, and if you get garbage data in, that means you're getting garbage data out. Right, so you want to maximize how well you're able to like get your data in and be able to process that, right? So you want something that's intuitive. You want something that's going to be easy for scouts to follow and like check during the match. You want something that's going to be easy to verify during a match, right? So that's like kind of some of the things you try to do on your input end. But on your output end, something that we try to do a lot are instead of displaying raw numbers, right? We like have visualizations, so it's just like very obvious to see different things. So like, for example, like we graph like game pieces per match, right? So we can easily see if like there's a dip, we know that they were like either defended or they like broke or something. So that like helps us make decisions later on. And that's just like super simple and super easy to see and like not too hard to create like in Excel or in a web format or Python or whatever.
Yeah, I'll jump in on this one too. So I won't try and repeat what they said. I think simplicity is absolutely the way to go. When it comes to data input, something as simple as a whiteboard where you're just ticking off how many game pieces scored is plenty for a lot of teams out there, especially if you have a smaller scouting team. And they're right. More accurate scouting data is going to be more helpful to you than a ton of scouting data that you're probably not going to use anyway. When it comes to data output, at least 2412, we like to do two things. We have the simplicity end where we have some sort of equation that we've built throughout the season to create pick lists for us. So that when we're going out on the field, we kind of have something pre-prepared to like tell us like, these are the robots that are going to be a good fit with us. And these are the good robots that are going to be a good fit with us and another team that hypothetically picked us, or that we picked, excuse me. And so that's really helpful. But when it comes to like out on the field, we trust our scouts, our lead scout, to know what they're looking at. And so we do give them all the data that we find relevant. So when it comes to like game pieces scored on average, climb rate, stuff like that, we want to have that like right there ready to go. So if something is changing on the field, if we're going up against a particularly tough alliance, they have all the data necessary just to look at right on their Excel spreadsheet. As far as data visualization goes, it's certainly helpful to have to make quick and easy evaluations. We tend to prefer just ranking the teams based off of their ability in each respective field that we like. But data visualization just takes that a one step further, and I think it's absolutely the right decision for teams out there.
That's everything.
Yeah. You can
so
go.
everything we have.
I was gonna say.
Okay, so we're moving on to the next question. How should the budget and workforce of a team affect the type of scouting system they pursue?
I guess I can kind of talk about this, or like I think Citrus also has like an interesting perspective on this because I think we're talking before this, and it sounds like Citrus like pursued a bunch of different things, right?
Yeah. I mean, something that we've done in the past is we've built a much simpler scouting system in order to like simulate what it's like for a if you don't have the development resources or the like the budget for scouting, like a full electronic scouting system. There's a lot simpler methods that we've implemented in the past. Yeah. Psychron, did you want to say anything? Or did you want to start us off at this one? Yeah.
Oh yeah. I think the discussion that we're having, right, is like I think both of our teams have played with like a couple of different options, right? So actually, just to start this off, right? Like for us, we have a web-based system, and we kind of have since 2015. So it's like a web app, right, that we have running on a server. We've tried like running it on a local server at competitions. We've tried like having kids bring their phones to like connect to the internet, like, you know, using like 4G or whatever, right? Not like a Wi-Fi network. And I think that obviously like having a pen and paper system with Excel is going to be like the lowest cost and the lowest maintenance required, I believe, right? But that introduces its own like complexities later on. But I don't know if it's actually, you could probably develop like a more high tech system, right, with like tablets or like a website sort of thing for fairly cheap, right? And I know that like Ethan, what we're talking about, like I think like last week, right, was something about how, you know, like you all have tried a lot of different things, and it's an interesting point where like at a certain point, it's not about like the resources and budget you have, right, but it's like more of what feature set works for you, right?
Yeah. A lot of it is what you think you need and what you really need in terms of you know, in terms of features on the output end. Like if you don't need specific data, then you don't need to scout for it. And I think a good example of that on our system, where we reduced complexity, or I guess increase complexity for one season, was in 2018. 2018 was the first season that we started tracking times. And the reason we started tracking times of placements and stuff was because we found out that a very good metric to see how like teams would do at the champs level is the amount of cubes that they could place on the scale by a certain time in the match. And that increased the complexity of our system. It didn't increase the like complexity of the UI on the scout end, because they didn't have to track the time. It was all tracked internally on the tablet, but it definitely increased the complexity of our system overall. So I think a lot of how complex a system that you want to make is dependent on what data you think is important. And I think that's also related a lot to the hardware and software that you choose when making a system, because some software is definitely better equipped to do something like that than other software.
That makes sense. Eric, I'm actually like interested in hearing like your pipeline of technology, right? Like how do you guys scout in general?
Yeah, I mean, when I joined 2412 back in 2015, something like that, we were 5 to 10 person team. Our scouting consisted of our team captain sitting in the stands with OneNote open, just furiously typing like qualitative notes about the teams he saw. And you know, that's frustrating, being there and not having enough people to actually effectively scout. And so for the smallest teams out there, I would recommend just talking to some of the bigger teams in your area and seeing if they're willing to help you out or collaborate. And most of the time they will be willing to. By the time I was in senior year, we were a 60-person team, and we had a full-fledged scouting team, and we had a process in line. And we didn't have something super complex. We were a pen and paper Excel spreadsheet type of scouting team. You know, through the year, we would kind of talk about what are the important metrics, what is our robot going to look like, and what are we going to be looking for in an alliance, and what kind of role are we playing? Are we a defensive bot? Are we a second? Or are we a first pick type of robot? Or are we an alliance captain out there? And so we try and put the systems in place on Excel as early as possible, and then we just develop a very simple piece of paper with a plastic cover over it and give everyone markers, and we put them in the stands for maybe 8 matches at a time, and just have them collect down the data. And so it's very much you know, it's a small part of our team in the fact that it doesn't take up very much time through the season. It's maybe 1 or 2 people developing the software on Excel, and that's it. Competition, it keeps everyone engaged. They don't get burned out because they're only doing it for a couple matches, and it's very simple for them to keep up with. There's also nothing to go wrong because it's just pen and paper. So we do like that process. As far as like budgeting, we've never spent $1 on our scouting software, and I for a lot of teams, that's totally okay. I think for the most part, you're getting very similar results when you're talking about like an Android system versus just a pen and paper system. For teams out there that want to give their students an extra challenge that really want to like push themselves to learn something new, I think it's absolutely a cool thing to go for. But don't feel pressure to like overcomplicate your system just for the sake of having something on a phone.
That makes sense. There's like actually I'm curious to like I'm always curious in season, like when our kids are developing the software and system, like I'm wondering if they're taking too much time or they're like not taking enough time, right? Like how much time do your teams like take to develop your system, right? Is it like a rolling basis from the beginning of season? Is it like full time? Because like for us, right, like are a lot of our scouting and strategy kids who develop the system like are also like programming kids or also like prototyping kids, right? So sometimes I feel like bad when we have to pull them away from that to work on the scouting system. But I'm curious to hear like, you know, for your Excel spreadsheet, how long does that take to make? And for Citrus's like 18 billion, you know, different really cool things, right? How long does that take?
Right. Yeah, no, it's a great question. It's gonna vary from year to year, but as far as like putting programmers on it versus dedicated scouting people, the people that are developing these Excel spreadsheets are typically not going to be programmers. They're going to be people that are dedicated towards the scouting part of the team, and that's going to be a small portion of the team. But the Excel spreadsheet, at least for us, doesn't change drastically from year to year. They usually do spend a good bit of their time researching new systems that we could take advantage of, and we oftentimes do. And so things like Tableau is something they do spend a majority of the year kind of like looking into and seeing if it's something we want to implement. Unfortunately, I got a bit cut off because of the weird wonky last season. But as far as like actual time in Excel, the initial development process back in, I want to say 2017, I sat down for, I don't know, I want to say maybe like 50 combined hours and develop that spreadsheet. And since then, we just tweak it year to year to make sense for what kind of data we're tracking. But the same process is still kind of there, and the same data collection and data output is going to be very similar. So it's not a huge amount of time. I would say we spend far more time having our scouts sit down with the spreadsheet and with the pen and paper and practice on matches, usually week 0 matches. And they watch them live and they scout them, and we come out with data and we do a full mock the scouting meeting, and they talk it out, and we have everything all practiced out, so there's nothing to go wrong at competition. Exactly.
Yeah. 1678's experience for how much time we spend on developing our scouting system is going to be very different than I'm guessing a lot of teams watching this, just because our size of our team. Currently we have around 100 students, I'm pretty sure. So we have a ton of resources in terms of members of our team. So we can afford to have people who are full-time developing the scouting system. It's quite a large sub-team. I believe we have about like 20 in the 20s how many developers we have full-time working on our scouting system. That's partially just because of the way that the sub-team structure on 1678 works. People who work on scouting also work on strategy, also work on chairmans. But yeah, I would say that those people are working full-time on our scouting system. And it's a lot of effort that we put into our scouting system, but we feel like it's worth it just because our scouting has yielded us some pretty good results in terms of picks and stuff.
I mean, a division since 2013, right? That's what scouting gets you.
Yep.
All right, so there's a question from the chat that's asking, how useful do you find your scouting data for your drive team during competition before draft night?
I can start out with that, I guess. I mentioned I'm also drive coach on 3476, and I didn't start out that way. I was like the scouting mentor, so I always wanted to explore different ways that drive team could use that data more. I'm always interested in like hearing what other teams do and what people do. But for us, I think what's interesting, right, is like we tried like a couple different ways. because our website is like live and on the internet, right? Like I can just pull out my phone and take a look at the data like just as soon as it gets uploaded, right after a match ends, which is always very useful to be able to like just easily see like what's going on with the team. Did they break last match? Like what their autos look like, all that kind of stuff. So our drive team uses it to try to like evaluate like what our alliance can do in a match, right? And it's also like a good sort of thing to say like, I think a good example of this, right, is in like 2018, where if a team, when we're trying to figure out like who's going to like place on the scale, who's going to work on the switch, who's going to work on the opponent switch, we can like pull out like a graph for a team and say like, hey, you guys in this match, like we're able to score like 5 cubes on the opponent switch. Instead of like going to the scale this time, do you want to just, work on that opponent switch? Because that seems like that worked really well for y'all. So we try to use that to tailor like the match strategy for a team live. But I think something more recent that's worked for us too is our head scout like sends a Slack message to our entire drive team, like kind of like as a prep report saying like, here's who you're with in this match, here's who you're against in this match, like here's what I think you guys should do, but like obviously feel free to change it up. So that's how we kind of we try to like actively incorporate our scouting data and our scouting students within our match strategy.
Yeah. The mention of 2018 as in terms of match strategy and scouting reminded me of something, and it's a very good example of something that we've done in the past. In 2018, you got an RP for getting all 3 robots across the starting line and placing a cube on the switch. So one of the best things that we've done with our viewer of the data in the hands of the match strategist is that they can see what teams are crossing that starting line 100% of the time, what teams are crossing it like 80% of the times, and if there's a team that hasn't crossed it yet. And that's a really good metric for us to have because it lets us know if there's a team on our alliance that possibly could use some help writing a simple auto code that could go across the starting line. And that's helped our strategy a lot, especially during the 2018 season. I believe 1678 in our division in Newton, we never missed any of the secondary RPs in that entire competition. The only reason we didn't seed first was because we lost some matches. So yeah, I think that's a really good example of stuff that you can use. The match strategy can use during the competition of the scouting data. Other stuff they use, they can also look at like how many game pieces your alliance usually scores. Tailor alliance strategy to that. Yeah.
Ethan, I'm actually curious. Does Citrus Service like use your scouting data to see like who might have broken and all that kind of stuff? Because Citrus Service like does a lot of really good stuff out there where like they go to teams and help them like work like every team, right? Like not teams that you're just with, like teams that you're against, everyone, right? Is that like a part of their process?
A lot of their process is like without the use of scouting data, just because they go around and mostly help teams that ask them to help. But a lot of the time when we have scouting data for a team that shows that they like haven't crossed the starting line yet in the competition, and they haven't contacted us yet, I believe usually the Citrus Service can go up to them, ask them like, oh, do you need help with creating something like that? And I think that's just a good example of it. And I think that's happened in the past. And that's another good use of scouting data is on the side of Citrus Service.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, I'll jump in here. I think Psych hit the nail right on the head. What 2412 does is a couple matches before we are up on the field, our lead scout or one of our lead scouts will put together a little piece of paper with the alliance we're with, the alliance we're going up against, and we'll put all of our data, even our team's data, down on the piece of paper. So they have it right there. We also put a recommended match strategy, and we have that lead scout go down to the drive team and talk individually with the whole drive team, as well as the drive coach, and kind of talk through how the match should go and what all the robots should and shouldn't be doing. When it comes to getting close to the alliance selection, I would say 3 or so matches before, that recommended strategy is getting a little bit more I don't want to say harsh, but specific in the fact that you kind of know where you're going to be ranking. And so you're going to know what kind of robot you're going to be looking like in the alliance selection. And so if that means you're ranking lower, you're probably going to be, the recommended strategy is going to be more like defense. And you need to show off that you can play that defensive role. If the data is showing that you are the best high goal shooter in the competition, then you should continue showing that off. That way your sales guys that are running around and talking to top 5 teams can show off that data and say, hey, look what we're doing. And we have a match coming up. We're going to be doing high goal shooting right there. Check it out. That really helps kind of the whole process come together. And your drive team needs to be on the same team and same page as your scouting team, which is on the same team as your sales team. Because your sales team needs to be pushing what your drive team is going to be doing. And that's really important for those lower ranked teams out there that want to get picked really high.
So I think someone mentioned about collecting efficient data. Someone asked, what are some data fields generally not recommended to collect for efficient data collection that people may add when developing their scouting system?
I think I can start us off with this one. Some examples of stuff that we have purposely omitted in the past in terms of collection. There's the occasional year where we collect where a team is scoring from, and it completely depends on the year. But in this past year, in 2020, we omitted where each team was scoring from the main scouts, and we left it to be a note that the some of the strategists would take. Just because it's hard for a scout to both track on the field where a team is shooting from, and also track to make sure that all 5 balls went in, and if not, track how many balls actually did go in. That's just the first thing that came to mind in terms of data not recommended, at least on our behalf.
I guess I can go. So I can divide this up into 2 places, right? So one, I think, Ethan pretty much said everything for in match stuff. I know he mentioned. I know some teams have had success in the past, evaluating how many game pieces a team has picked up or whatever. We generally don't do that because we find it's too much information for the scouts to get. We try to keep everything pretty streamlined and for very specific instances, right? So if there's anything super specific in a game, we try to relegate that to the comments, right? Because we want our scouts to be writing a lot of very detailed comments that we can look back on. But kind of shifting the question a bit, I think it's also interesting to talk about this from pit scouting, right? Because I don't know how everyone here feels about pit scouting. I think that's a different question and discussion. But I think we've all had the experience where a team comes up to the pit and they're like, okay, how many motors do you have? What kind of wheels do you have? How many wheels do you have? You don't need any of that, right? There's a lot of stuff that people ask when pit scouting that you can either get from watching matches or that you just flat out don't need, right? Generally for us, what we do is we just get a picture of the robot and we count the amount of we figure out how many batteries a team has in their pit, because that's generally a pretty good sign of how competition ready a team is, right? And how elims worthy a team is. And it's also a good thing, if you're in elims with them, right? If they need to borrow a battery from you guys or not. But I don't know if you need anything else from pit scouting, maybe other than that, what programming language they used, just in case you have a citrus service, sort of thing or something like that you can use to help a team, write an auto. But I don't think you need anything else from that.
I would actually a little bit disagree, and I think it comes down to different styles of how teams operate. The pit scouting for 2412, and at least with a lot of the teams that I'm familiar with, is one of the most important parts of what we do. And we try and collect as much data from the start as possible and try and compare that to what their actual results look like on the field. And so when it comes to motors, at least, the FRC is moving in the direction that defense is increasingly more and more important, I would argue. And so having effective drive bases and effective, motors is going to be a good indicator of whether or not they're going to be able to play defense for you reliably and effectively. That being said, on-field performance is the important part. If they can't produce what their robot should hypothetically be able to do, then what does it matter? And so we try and use the pit scouting data as kind of a multiplier effect. So when we go to that scout talk, the night before qualifications start, align selection. We try and kind of look like, here's what they said, here's what they're doing on the field. Is that kind of adding up? Yeah, it is. Okay. We should move this team higher manually. And we do that. As far as efficient data collection, it's going to really depend on what your team wants out of a robot. It can be, if there's something that you guys really want in a robot, then you guys should be collecting data for that. In general, I just recommend keeping track of how much people are scoring. I think is the most basic way to recognize what teams are good at what. Other than that, yeah, I mean, it depends. 2412 doesn't track how often a team fails at doing something. We just keep track of how often they do it successfully. I know some teams definitely do keep track of how often game pieces are dropped or shots are missed. That just, for us, is too much data to try and keep track of and is inconsequential if they're still scoring just as much either way. But yeah, and going back to pit scouting briefly, even if you don't gain value from the data you're getting from that pit scouting, I still think there's a lot of value in the relationships you build when you talk with teams at length about their robot, because people love talking about themselves and people love talking about their robot. And so when you're there for 3-5 minutes, kind of having a fluid conversation, don't go through a list, please. Those are the most annoying interactions. Have a conversation about the robot. And when you leave, you're going to have good data that you can use in a scouting meeting, but you're also going to have a new friendship, hopefully.
I think that's a pretty good point about having the kids who are doing pit scouting build relationships. I think that's something that we try to I mentioned that we only have 3 questions that we ask, but that's something we have comments for, and we try to encourage the kids to learn about the robots, right? So they can actually have fun, make new friends, and build those kinds of relationships. But going back to drive bases and trying to evaluate that, right? So in the past we have tried to see how what kind of wheels they have and motors they have correlates to on-field performance. I think this is an interesting point, but it's something that has been going on the last couple of years in FRC, or not the last couple of years, it's always been going on, but not picking a team based off of how they play defense in matches and what they're theoretically able to do, but based off their driving capabilities and ability. Right? Because sometimes there's a robot that only plays offense and they don't have the best mechanism, but their drivers are on point, right? And if they don't seed high, they might be a perfect defense bot, even if they don't have, even if they're just a kit bot with standard motors and standard wheels, right? But if their driver is on point, right? That's something that you can coach on field to help even if it's their first time playing defense, that you can make them, be a premier defender in that event. Yeah,
I totally agree on that front. And you're right. I think I left that out of kind of what I was saying. It does come down to driver's ability is going to be the biggest indicator of whether or not they're a good defensive bot or not. I've seen McKinnon bots go out there and kick butt at defense and be absolutely the best defensive bot of the competition, is their driver just knows how to be in the way. And that's the biggest part of being a good defensive bot, is being in the way of them, running it back and forth across the field. So the motors are not the only indicator. It's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah. Coming from the perspective of scouting defense, I know it's something that 1678 has tried a lot and failed probably several times. it's pretty hard to track how good a robot will be at defense just based off what they do on the field. Just because, as Saikiran was saying, a lot of the good defensive robots at the competition aren't going to be playing defense in qualifications pretty much at all, unless you like specifically say like, hey, could you play defense? We want to see how well you do it. But that is like not something that is something that you want to do to teams a lot of the time. So we've tried a lot to like find a good metric for defense, and a lot of it I've in the pickless meetings comes down to what they're how good they are at driving, which is something that our scouts qualitatively track during the competition, and also how many like motors they have sometimes. But a lot of it comes down to how well they drive, at least in our defensive like metrics.
One of my favorite things is I think someone mentioned their favorite robot being Strike Force in 2019, right? They were like this premier top tier offensive robot, but they were the number one pick at they were the first pick of the second seed at IRI 2019, and they only played defense in the limbs, which I thought was like really fascinating and like a really cool like analysis of high level picking and strategy, right? Where they were picked for the defensive ability, even though like they basically never played defense, but like they knew that they'd be like amazing defenders because swerve and all that kind of stuff, right? I think they played defense a couple of times, but I think that's like a different picking discussion. I'm actually curious, Ethan, right? Because I think that Citrus is the team that does the you rank how well a team drives like in a match, right? Like 1 through 6 or whatever. Right, you're trying to like figure out who's like the best driver in that match and the worst driver. Is that true?
It's by alliance. Generally, what we do is we track speed and agility. It's changed a lot over the years of what we track, but it's an ordinal ranking of like this team on this alliance is the most agile by our own interpretation of the match, and this team is the least agile. And we do analysis on that whole ordinal ranking based off of like all of those scores together, and we put out one metric based off of I believe it's the Z scores that we calculate.
That's really interesting. Like that's something that I've always been like interested in us trying to incorporate in our system, but we've always kind of fallen short of that. So you use the Z scores. I assume that you would just like find the averages, but I think Z scores is interesting. Like you get a normal distribution, and you're trying to figure out like who's in the middle and like who's at the tails. That's super cool.
Yeah.
Okay, I like the idea. I'd love to like. I know like it's always like weird to see teams scouting data, right? Because like it's there's always like the it might always be accurate and all that kind of stuff. But I'm always interested to see like what that would look for a certain event, or like how that would look for a certain event, or like. I would assume that like the top tier offensive robots, right, would like be trending towards the top of that, right? But I wonder like where you'd start seeing like the robots that aren't as good as offense on that list. But I guess that's like a different discussion.
Yeah. I mean, it's generally biased towards like the most offensive teams at the competition. Like we play with 1323 a lot. Like they're almost always the top on the driver ability score metric that we have. But we've found that it does generally yield a lot of good teams that are good at driving and are usually pretty good at defense. Yeah.
So Eric mentioned how he was on sales for his team. How much does a team take into consideration the sales pitches teams make prior to alliance selections?
Yeah, I love this question. And like most things we're talking about today, it's going to heavily depend on what kind of team you are, at least from my perspective. I mean, sales pitches come infrequently from what I've seen, at least in the PMW, you very rarely get teams that have an effective enough process to go around and talk to your top teams at a competition and effectively sell themselves. That being said, when I do get a team that comes up to the pit and wants to talk alliance selection, and they are ranked 30th, 35th, and they're struggling a little bit, and they put together an effective presentation about why that is, I am so willing to hear that out and bring that to the scouting lead and talk about that. Because they're able to talk really well does not mean their robot is going to perform really well, and you have to be cognizant of that, because you can't get lulled into someone who's a really good presenter. That being said, there are legitimate reasons why teams struggle early in competitions, but they're still good picks for alliance selection. There's also talk about good defensive bots don't always play defense, and so if they want to come around and talk about how they spent 40 hours training their drivers to do defense, and their drive base is ready to go, and they're going to play defense during match 67, so we should watch that. You should be willing to hear it out. On the flip side of things, this isn't really what the question asked, but sales is super effective, especially if you're a struggling team. But no matter what kind of team you are, unless you're the first seeded team, you should be talking to a lot of other teams in the competition and selling your guys' ability. You have all the data in hand, and so you should take it there and show off what you've done well. And hopefully at your scouting meeting, you've talked about what kind of robot you're going to be in the line selection, and that's what your sales team should be pushing to these other teams. And because it is so rare, it's usually pretty effective, even if you're not even if your argument isn't necessarily the strongest in the world. An effective sales presentation is going to give a good tint to your team in the minds of the lead scout when they go out onto the field and they're trying to remember what a good defensive bot is. And there's so many teams there. It really sets you apart when you go do those sales pitches.
Coming from the perspective of a team that's often, well, I wouldn't say often, but sometimes we have had teams come up to us and ask us hey, we did pretty well in this competition. We had a couple tough matches, and we were hoping that you could pick us. A lot of the times, since we as a team have a lot of people who go into our pick list meeting, a lot of the time the decision of how we rank each team on our pick list is not really based that much on what one specific person in that meeting hears. This could be localized entirely to our team, but we haven't had that many times in the past where a team comes up to us and then that has had a super big effect on how the pick list changes. Now, on the flip side, we do track trends in our data, which means that we can see if a team struggled at the beginning of the competition, but they're coming back around and they've scored a ton in the past couple matches, and they're going to be a surprise pick. And we oftentimes, if a team is struggling, if they were high or they dropped in terms of game piece scored per match, or the other way around, then we often go to their pits and ask them about it. Oftentimes it's either they were playing defense for a match, or they were their robot broke down and then they found exactly what the problem was and then they fixed it. A lot of that goes into analysis at picklist night. Yeah.
Ethan, how often would you say a salesperson comes up to 1678 and tries to pitch their team to you?
I don't think I can answer this question the most effectively, because oftentimes it's not people coming up to me, it's people coming up to our lead strategist, which has changed over the years. But of all the teams that have come up to the scouting people in the stands and asked, that hasn't really happened that much, so I can't really give a good answer to that, I don't think.
I can jump in as well. To be honest, I don't think we pay attention to sales pitches. They're it's hard, right? Because like I've been on both sides of that, and it's like always really difficult. But like we tend to trust our scouts in the data that they collect, and we try to like form our opinions based off of like what we see and what the scouts see, right? So sales pitches don't really factor in that much. But on the other flip side of that, right, there is something where if a team says like, "Hey, we've been like struggling all day, but like check out this next match and check out this auto that we're going to run that we've never run before," right? That's something that we will look at, but yeah, it's definitely hard. Yeah.
I completely agree with that. I think that sales pitches that aren't localized on specific matches, like we have, like I've heard, I talk to the match strategists a lot, of course, and those pitches, I don't think they really remember that much going into the pick list night. But if a team comes up to us and is like, we think we're gonna do really well this match because we got this special auto, or we're gonna play defense this match, and we know that you guys are looking for like a defense bot probably for your second pick, then we'll pay close attention to that, make a note, and then that'll have an influence on our pick list night. But in my experience, at least, generally that's more effective than just an overall, hey, we did pretty well at this competition according to our scouting data. We think you guys should pick us for this, and this reason.
Yeah, to picking back off that as well, I think that's like incredibly like a good distinction, right? Localized sales pitches, where like the auto or like a mechanism that like they think that they've finally gotten working, right? Something like, hey, I know like we haven't been doing good, but check this one out, right? It works a lot better than like, we think we're okay at this event, or like we think you should pick us at this event.
Yeah. One more thing. One thing that at least 1678 has done in the past, this is probably not the most familiar in experience, but in years where we're not seated first in our division, a lot of the times when we appeal to the the team who's ranked first in the division, since we're known for our scouting system, a lot of the time we're like, hey, if you pick us first, then we can make a better pick for second pick, and we can have a more informed decision for the second pick. That has worked. Like, it's hard to judge whether they picked us because of the scouting data or because of our robots, but that has happened in our divisions for a couple of years. I know when we appealed to get 118 to pick us in 2017, we said that, and 148 in 2016. But I don't know. I think that's a good thing if you're looking to be picked first, is to appeal with your scouting data.
It's definitely dumb to bet against Citrus at champs, right? I think that's a hard bet to make in good faith. But yeah, actually on that flip side, right, it's also like very if you're like in the top like X number of robots for contention for like first pick or whatever, sometimes it's nice just to like do kind of what I said, right, where it's like, hey, look at this next match. I keep on going back to 2018 as a good example, but 2019 too. I think like at AVR we went up to Citrus and said like check out this next match. We have we're going to be just showing off our like 2-hatch cargo ship auto, right? It wasn't like, hey, pick us, but like just this is something different that we're trying out, because like the rest of this event we're trying to get rockets into RP, so we're trying to like do our 2-hatch rocket ship auto, right? But this next match, like this is right before limbs, we want to show you that this is something that we're capable of doing at least.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I know that Citrus has had a lot of scouting systems over the years. Do you ever reuse parts of the scouting system from previous years? Or do you like completely make new scouting systems from scratch every year?
Okay. That really depends on the year. There's been a lot of drastic change in terms of our scouting system, but it has generally stayed the same. I want to say since like 2015. In terms of the actual software we use for it, we have rewritten at least a major part of the system every year. And in the 2020 system, we had a major overhaul where we changed like most of the parts of the system. It really changes depending on the year. We look back at what went well and what went wrong the previous year, and we're looking to improve, make a more reliable system, make a system that's like not going to break down during competition. Yeah, it really depends on the year.
For us, right, since 2015, like that was kind of when we like wrote that system from scratch, like our web-based system for the first time. And kind of like similarly, I guess, to like Citrus, we try to like there's some of it we try to like at least derive inspiration from the last year, but a lot of it gets rewritten from year to year. But like a lot of like the GUI stuff stays very similar. But we just try something new and different, and I think it like scales appropriately for each year depending on like the skills of our students and like how much time we have.
What database do you use in order to store all your data?
I'm gonna start with this one. This has also changed depending on our system. Most recently in 2020, we started using MongoDB just because we liked how it was. It has an offline system where you can store it on the local computer, and it also has a cloud that we can use for viewing it on the viewer and like the pick list and stuff. In past years, we used Firebase with varying levels of success. Yeah.
For us, we've always used MySQL because we're we use Boomer technology, right? Just raw PHP with JavaScript, and so MySQL works pretty well for like just like regular databases or like regular web servers, just like out of the box. So even when we like run our systems locally, we just like we use software called WAMP. It's like a Windows, Apache, PHP, all that kind of stuff. And like all that usually comes with MySQL, or like an instance of MySQL that you can use. But we've also played around with Firebase in the past, and that's like pretty nice. But we're always looking to expand and like figure out what's the best out there.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add on this one.
I think we don't have that much time left, but how do we best distribute our scouts throughout a competition? I think we touched on this a little bit before, but I just want your take on it.
Well, I'm interested to hear what some of the, we obviously have two other really great successful teams here, and 2412 isn't ranked often in the top four. And so I think our scouts are distributed differently than a top team would necessarily distribute their scouts. But, we try and we have 6 scouts, one for each team, and then we usually have a data inputter and then a data inputter assistant, and then usually the lead scout is in the stands as well. So that's what nine people in the stands at any given time, plus additional students that are just watching that usually help out with the scouting process. And they scout for just a couple matches at a time, and we try and keep burnout really, really low. It gives them an opportunity to go into the pits and get buttons and talk with other teams. The rest of our scouting team, if they're not actually scouting, are going to be in the pits making sales pitches, which is a very big part of how our team operates, it's a little bit unorthodox from my experience, but we really do like our sales pitches. And then other scouts are also going around to teams and doing kind of, when pit scouting is over, they're going to be out there talking to teams about their leadership structure, their business plan, stuff like that, getting information that's not necessarily relevant to that competition. But it gives them an opportunity to make connections with other teams and learn and bring that experience back to our team so we can improve for the next season. So, we are a bigger team. I would, first eliminate the pit scouting type stuff. First, your first priority is making sure you have solid data in the stands. So for those smaller teams out there, just make sure you got 6 people in the stands, keeping track of every single team.
I can go next. So we aren't like the biggest team. So I think like we go from like around like 28 kids to like maybe 40 kids max. But like at regionals, right, we end up like having maybe 10 scouting kids, right? So we try to, or scouting students. So we try to like have, at least one scout per team, and then like our head scout. And then we've been trying to like also do like this is something that we've tried to like steal from Citrus, actually, where you have like one scout or one person looking at each alliance. But that's hard for us to do sometimes, especially like when we don't have as many students. At champs, it like changes because not all our students are able to make it to champs. So we end up like trying to partner with like a local team that we know that we're like, hey, you want to scout with us? So we end up like having maybe 6 of our students there, and then maybe a couple of their students, and we like share data and we scout together. Harder to do when you don't have as many kids, but it's definitely we try to like give them breaks, but I don't like it, but like our head scouts end up like staying sitting there like the entire day, right, just collecting data and watching every match, and they get really tired, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but they're super dedicated and we're very grateful for them. But this is something that like we're definitely like by no means good at. We're always trying to figure out how to like schedule better, how to like prevent burnout better for our scouts, and how to like have a healthier scouting culture.
Yeah, of course, 1678 is probably not the most common example in terms of distribution of our scouts, just because we have a ton of kids on our team. We have a ton of kids that we bring to competition specifically for scouting, because we try to have like a specific job just for everyone who goes to competition. We, of course, have the 18 scout system plus the 2 subjective scouts who are all scouting. We also have backup scouts because we want to have consistent breaks that the lead scout is scheduling. We generally don't have that much trouble scheduling our scouts just because we have so many. And even if like one doesn't get back from their break on time, I'm still in the stands watching the system. I can scout. The lead scout generally scouts. Yeah. In terms of if we had a lot smaller of a team and a lot less scouts, definitely make sure first priority is to make sure every match 6 people at least are in the stands, just watching each robot, tracking what they do. I would say that's probably the most important. Also, yeah, breaks are super important to make sure that scouts don't get too tired.
And I think that is all the time we have for today. Is there any way our viewers would be able to contact you guys?
I think if you flip to the last slide on this presentation, there's a contact list.
Yeah, you can always find me on Chief Delphi, or like messaging a team account or anything like that for Code Orange.
Yeah, Chief Delphi is the best way to reach me. I'm super active on there. My username is just my name, so feel free to reach out.
If you want to reach out to me, probably the best way is software scouting at citruscircuits.org. It's an email. I think you can find it on our website as well. It's just the word software, the word scouting at citruscircuits.org.
Thank you so much, Logan, for moderating this. This was a lot of fun.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you.